Welcome, everybody. We are here a little bit delayed, but it was just to build the suspense. We just wanted everybody to be here and
That's
to
right.
hear when it was going to happen, but it's happening. We're here. We have Dan. I'm sure most of the audience knows who Dan is, but would you like to give the audience a little feel for who you
Of
are, what you do?
of course. I'm objectively Dan. I've been doing most people probably know me from the shows I've been hosting with the atheist community of Austin for the past 6 years or so. I am the creator of a show called Truth Wanted. And I also co-host with you sometimes on Talk Heathen and Medical Myth Community. I need to give you my sincerest apologies because I am the reason why this stream was delayed today. Well, I say it was me. I had a car appointment for an oil change and a state inspection because we still do that here in Texas, even though they're not going to do it next year. I had it at 11 o'clock today. It is now 3:35, and I'm just getting home. I did not expect for it to take that long, but literally 5 minutes ago, I got into the door here, set things up, and I'm ready to go for you guys. So let's talk about some bullshit, huh? Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, and I was looking everywhere for different topics to bring Dan on because I knew I wanted Dan to be on the show at some point, and I don't know why it didn't hit me much sooner. But like this is a topic I wanted to talk about for a long time anyway because it's been all over the internet and especially people by the names of Joe Rogan and Jordan
Mm-hmm.
Peterson, who are very
Mm-hmm.
familiar to most of us, have kind of perpetuated this as being a reasonable lifestyle. And I figured, just based on your history and your background, that you would have some things to say about it. So if people haven't figured it out by the title, we are talking about the carnivore diet today. And if you're not familiar with it, it's not the keto diet. It is a form of a keto diet, but this
Yep.
is incredibly restrictive. Absolutely no plant matter at all. And we'll get into kind of some of the caveats with that in kind of the bulk of this show. But it's essentially animal products only, which is in stark contrast to Dan's perspective and a lot of the medical community's perspective, which we'll get into. But Dan, can you give kind of a little bit of your background and why this topic is so appropriate for
That's
you
so
to
funny.
guest?
It's because I am the stereotyped resident vegan, and so therefore I'm going to be the most opinionated and outraged, I guess. I think is this the reasoning why Dr. Ben has chosen me for this topic today. But no, I started going vegan in 2020, so it's been about 4 years now. And it's like a it's a commitment that I've tried to make. I'm not perfect about that. I'm very open about that. I've definitely eaten animal products since then, but it is just a sort of like how I tend to gear myself, right? Because I am vegan for ethical reasons. There's a lot of reasons why people go vegan or attempt to go vegan. Some people see it as a dietary fad. Some people just need more plant-based stuff in their life because they got high cholesterol or just whatever. But I do it specifically for philosophical reasons. And I feel like the people who do the meat-based diets like specifically just want to own vegans. I think it's
Mhm.
like purely motivated by spite most of the time because the health benefits have at best are not great. I don't know. There's no I mean
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something to it and maybe you could talk about that, but everything I see is just pretty negative. So,
Yeah, we're gonna get into some of their rhetoric on
yeah.
what they tell people to get into the carnivore diet, and there is definitely a cult following of this, and
Yes.
it's the same cult following that gets into like the primal lifestyle, which is a whole big thing of people wanting to live like
Yeah.
their ancestors, which isn't even what we understand about our ancestors isn't even really accurate
Oh
because
yeah.
we know that like hunting took a lot of energy and a lot of effort and a lot of resources and people primarily gathered. Like so it's not a hunter gatherer society, it was more of a gathering with some hunting. And like people don't really understand that piece of it. And so you
Yeah.
can imagine this fiction of what life was like back then, but it's really inaccurate for what we know and there's still more to learn about it. But the fact that being a meat eater makes you stronger and more tough, um, we'll get into why that's not really the case and makes people kind of
Right.
ridiculous, and it's kind of cringe in a lot
Yeah.
of.
There's definitely historical revisionism within these communities, and also it's extremely ideologically motivated, which is very interesting. You don't see that with these kinds of things. Obviously, as a vegan, I'm an ethical vegan, right? So yeah, my situation is also ideologically motivated. But like again, like I get the sense theirs is just purely out of spite. There is this idea that the Western society and that manhood has somehow been in decline, and this is sort of a return to form in some ways, that by somehow mimicking our ancestors that we'll be able to retain some sense of masculinity, or just sense of control that a lot of men today just feel like they don't have. And that's,
Mhm.
I would argue, broadly due to capitalism. They would say it's because of the libs. So it's kind of just a different, I mean, I would also say in part it's because of liberal people. But the point is, right? Point is, it's like a kind of really it's the same kind of folks who are like, okay, I need to go to this like alpha male camp so I can like be better, and like and listen to these life coaches and do all this stuff. Like it's the same audience, same target
Mhm.
demographic that I find that are interested in these sort of meat only diets. So yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon for sure.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is the perception that it's easier, like it's an
Mm,
easier way to get healthy in their perspective, or an easier way to lose weight, the easier way to do all these things when it really isn't, for one.
right.
And I get that it's easier for people in America, especially, to rely on a high red meat and high saturated fat diet. It's an easy thing to go to. Like, I'm just going to eat 4 burger patties for lunch and call that good. Like,
Right.
I mean, I'm personally not into that, but for some people, that's easier than adopting like a higher plant intake, because people already have a notoriously low plant intake.
Yeah.
But a lot of what
In
we
the
even
US.
have seen, yeah, in the US.
Mhm.
But a lot of what we've seen in the medical community has changed in terms of their dietary recommendations, and we'll get into, the AHA and the ACC's dietary recommendations, that have come about more recently, and kind of why they, like, contradict what we're seeing in the carnivore community. But I think enough rambling on all that. I think maybe, um I don't know if because we have a clip from Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson, but we all know that both of them ramble a lot.
Yeah, they
And
definitely do.
I wonder if we get into the article first, because then that will kind of set the stage for what we're even talking about and what the claims are, and then maybe we can end with the laughs, by laughing at Jordan Peterson.
I'm down for whatever, you know. I
We'll
think
go with the flow.
this is a subject that I appreciate you asking me to talk about, because like when it comes to, first of all, diets and nutrition are notoriously, right, have a lot of
Mhm.
woo woo and bullshit out
Yep.
there. And so I'll be the first to tell you that yeah, there's a lot of vegans in particular who will say, oh yeah, well, plant-based diet's magical and will cure you and will do all these things, and will, I mean, and first of all, there's absolutely benefits to a plant-based diet. It's not a cure for everything. It's not
Mhm.
like a palliative for all your ailments, right? And on the contrary, I'm sure having more meat in your diet like that obviously has some benefit. It's not going to be all negative, but it's the same problem happens, right? Where it's just like, oh, it can also do all these also crazy things. I mean, this happens with any kind of, you know, particular food thing, I guess. So I don't know. I think it's worth addressing and bringing up, because we are, I think, as Americans, we are just the king of misinformation when it comes
Mhm.
to food and like what's actually healthy for you versus what's not. And as you mentioned, like it is more accessible for Americans to do something like this because we have the largest meat subsidized access in the world, right? It doesn't even
Mhm.
come close. Like Australia is number two, but like America's number one. We have the cheapest available meat to people, and I think that's why we have this idea that oh, it's okay if we consume more. When in reality, the vast majority of the world does not consume as much as we do on anyway. And that's not trying to
Mhm.
do this like every day, like these folks are, right? So it's very, very wacky thing. But of course, it's going to start in America because why wouldn't
Oh,
it?
yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah, and you have,
uh,
like, these channels as well that will just have all of the clickbait
mm,
by eating sticks of butter, just
yeah,
plain
yeah.
sticks of butter, and, like, that gets engagement, and these people get more and more engagement, and their message spreads further, and, I don't know if you heard about the whole thing with the Liver King, but I did a medical myth specifically about him, um, like, probably a year or so ago now. It's been a while since the show's actually been on, but
Mm,
his whole thing was like the primal diet, like very red meat heavy. But his thing that he was preaching was to eat raw liver, and it got found out that, and I mean, like people knew this ahead of time, but finally evidence was like confirmed that he was using, was it like tens of thousands of dollars in steroids every month? And
oh
so he was
yeah,
like,
okay, yeah,
yeah,
I
so
know
he
that.
was like,
Yeah,
all of these gains like came from eating this primal way and like
yeah.
acting as if I'm moving like a deer behind me, like taking my weight sled in public. But he was doing a massive amount of steroids and probably still is doing a massive amount of
I
steroids.
remember hearing about this
Yeah.
now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, again, like it's a matter of image more than anything else. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, so I sometimes would like what is it about Andrew Tate that people like, for example, right? Like he is, if you they've done surveys on Gen Z who the most popular person that they consider, like, and he's like been number one for Gen Z kids. And it's like, why? What's up with this guy? Part of it is just status. Part of it is just the things that
Mhm.
he represents. He has like things that people want. He has access to millions of dollars. He has extremely problematic, but also, access to women, right? That has got him in trouble. And it's like these things that people feel insecure about. I think he has. And for some reason, these bodybuilder types, these folks who spend all day, every day at the gym, who are cultivating this image for themselves, are representing something that people feel insecure about and people want to be able to attain. And it doesn't come as a surprise to me that this is just another grift in a long series of grifts of people trying to feel better about their self-esteem through traditional masculine archetypes and imagery. So yeah, very interesting times we live in, eh?
Yeah, definitely. So I found this website, which unsurprisingly is, I'm trying to pull it up. It's from a meat company. Um, I think their main thing is like jerky or something weird, but they sell meat. So obviously they're going to get on board with this because they're going to sell more meat
Right.
by doing that.
Yeah.
So, so we'll kind of go through this. Like,
Yeah.
we don't have
And
to
I
hit
love.
on,
Oh,
yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, we don't have to hit on every single point in a lot of detail because it's kind of a long article, but it puts everything into bullet points, which is kind of nice for us.
Yeah, I love the idea of the carnivore diet, but also like it's not purely carnivore. Like, well, I guess if you can, that's I was gonna say they talk about eggs later, but I guess carnivores mostly do eat eggs actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, even though it's not traditionally meat, but I'm thinking like cats and stuff eat eggs. So never mind. I was gonna be pedantic, but
Oh
I don't know.
yeah.
It's just it's just silly. I guess it's just a silly thing. I don't know. I don't know what else to say at the beginning here. I don't know.
Yeah. So they say in their little intro, there's a new diet in town and it's meaty. The carnivore diet, popularized by Sean Baker, has gone somewhat viral since 2018 due to its extreme stance. It advises an all meat diet. To heck with fruits and vegetables. What you need is grass fed meat like the days of old. By eliminating carbs, we absolve ourselves of the misfortunes and health issues that have arisen due to a Western diet loaded with carbs and inflammatory ingredients. Love that buzzword there of
Yeah.
inflammation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's
It's not. Yeah, go ahead.
oh yeah, that's what this all comes down to.
Yeah, so, point of contention here. Grass fed is very interesting. A lot of folks talk about grass fed meat that and they say, oh, it's supposed to be better for you, and all this and that. So one thing that I think is important to point out about the meat industry is that cows can live up to like 20 years. They die usually within the first year or two if they're for meat, like after 5 if it's like dairy, right? Because they
Mhm.
only need to raise them to get so big to kill them, right? So like while they're feeding them the grass fed stuff, for some regulatory bodies, it doesn't actually mean they have to be grass fed their entire life. And on top of that, they're getting all the same supplements and stuff
Mhm.
that non-grass fed cows are being fed anyway, right? So it's like if you're worried about what the kinds of stuff they're feeding, because the ones that aren't grass fed, they're grain fed, right? So
Mhm.
like if you're worried about all the extra stuff that you don't know what happens when they're not grass fed, they're getting the same stuff with grass fed
Yep.
cows, right? They're doing all the same fortifications and stuff. So that's also kind of a buzzword even within itself. And I know there's studies that have said, oh, there's some differences between what grass-fed meat looks like and other kinds of meat, and that's there, but like it is a marketing thing, just FYI.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll get more into detail on the inflammatory ingredients thing,
Yeah,
because they make that a huge point, and I love this article because they cite some studies that they clearly didn't read because it does not support their points,
of
and
course.
we'll look at them. We'll look at the source. We won't go in
You
depth
love to
into the
see it.
sources, but
You
like
love to
even
see
based
it.
on the title, yeah, even based on the title, it doesn't tell you why you should be carnivore. And I will say this, like, from the get-go, um, that while this is, like, physiologically very similar to the keto diet, there are some distinctions, which we'll kind of get into here, but there I'm not a huge fan of keto, for a lot of reasons, but it does have some uses, specifically for people with diabetes and people with epilepsy,
Yeah,
um, which I'll kind of get into that when we have our physiological deep dive. But like there are some applications to a low carb diet,
right.
but this is like such a step further. And like they're saying here, what is the carnivore diet? Like it's just animal products.
Yeah,
Like so that's no fruits, no vegetables, no fiber. Like it's very, very restrictive.
yeah. You're gonna
Where
be on the toilet
keto,
for a long time on this
yeah, it's like
diet.
keto at least allows you to have vegetables.
Yeah,
um,
right. Right. And like, the human body, and I was planning on talking about this later, but I'll say this now, right? The human body is extremely resilient, right?
mhm,
Like there's that one guy that ate like Twinkies for a year, right? Just to
yeah,
prove a point. Like, yeah, we can do amazing things and eat all kinds of stuff and subsist on a lot of things. Doesn't mean it's great for you in the long term, right? Like you can absolutely do almost any kind of diet you can imagine, but there are, as you mentioned, there's prescriptive reasons why you might be interested in doing one diet or another. The truth is, the human body can handle a lot that's thrown at it. Uh, Out of all the food groups, I think meat has got to be the one. I mean, like even before I was vegan, I think I recognized like, yeah, it's carcinogenic, right? Like it's just not great for a lot of reasons. And the folks who are in this community, this article doesn't talk about it too much, but with the actual influencers in this community, they just really talk about it like it's just God's gift to man, the meat.
mhm.
It's like it's all we need. It's all we need to subsist on. And it's really fascinating to see.
Yeah, which is indeed it's like their statement in here, where they say, in fact, carbohydrates, which are abundant in plants, are the only non-essential macronutrient. And I have some contention with that point because, like, yeah, can you live without carbs? Absolutely, but you're risking a lot, and like your body is not like built around um ketosis and
Yeah.
ketogenesis for a long time. Like that's an
Right.
emergency thing. Like what you're doing here is you're entering a starvation diet and you are using your emergency system all of the time.
Yeah.
And that can be very, very problematic.
Yeah.
Um and I'll get more into that with later points. Try not to use all my
No, I
when it
I
comes to
I I
this
hear
for
what you're saying,
sure.
like, I don't wanna get out into it all at once, but again, like, that's another criticism that happens with plant-based diets. That's, like, one of the known negatives is that it can have a tendency to be high carb, right? And it's like, yeah, no,
Mhm,
there's just, like, no one diet that's gonna solve all of your needs. Again, I choose to live my life the way I do because I have ideological reasons, right? And it's like I have to navigate around that. I'm never gonna have one size fits all solution for some folks. You're gonna have to figure out what's gonna be best for you. But like there's no good ideological reasons to do this, and there's no good health reasons to do this, right? Like this is like the
mhm,
worst of all worlds, I think. And I like what you said about because like Ben, I know you're because obviously you're a fucking doctor. Like you read studies and stuff when you talk to people who cite studies, you can 90% of the time, I feel like when I talk to people and they say, "Oh, there's studies on this," I don't think they've ever actually read a study from like
mhm.
abstract to conclusion, like in their life. You know what I mean?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I'm glad you looked ahead of time and to see like, oh, do these actually matched up? Because yeah, I could totally believe that they're just pulling stuff out of their butt for this.
Yeah, and I kinda knew what points they were going to make,
Yeah.
and I was like it's funny because even some of the benefits that we're gonna see that they propose are not exclusive to the carnivore diet. Like,
Mm,
the things that they're saying relate to macronutrient intake and not to what source they come from. Like, a lot of the things they're gonna talk about relate to, like, fat intake, which, um, surprise, surprise, is not limited to animal fat. Like, there are plenty of often better plant-based fats that
right.
do similar things, and, so we'll get into those things, but, yeah, so jumping straight into their, uh, supposed list of benefits here, um, their number 1 on here, and I think this is the one that most people um, will claim is weight loss, which I will give it to them that you can have significant weight loss. However, it's very transient,
Mm,
and there's multiple reasons for this. Like, I mean, yeah, it can help you with satiety if you're having high protein intake, but um, usually if you're doing a high protein diet that's lower in fat content, you can do a pretty decent job. Um, but high fat doesn't necessarily make you less hungry,
mhm,
and you're you're initially going to lose a lot of weight from water weight because glycogen, which is the storage form of sugar, carries a lot of water with it. And especially that first big weight loss that you get is mostly water coming off because you're utilizing all of your glycogen.
right.
And when you're not storing as much, you're not gaining as much weight from the storage and you're losing that water. So, a lot of times, people who were on keto diets, they gain a lot of weight back after they stop because a lot of it was transient weight and not actually fat loss.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That matches up with my experience. And yeah, of course, anecdote is king, right? So if it matches up with my
Mhm.
anecdotal experience, then that's what how I know something is true. But yeah, I think you're definitely right. Like it's gonna be like many kinds of trends, or especially if you're like if you've never done a fad diet before, if you're actually sticking to meal planning, you're probably going to get some benefit, right? Even like
Mhm.
regardless of the diet, because like you're actually paying attention and caring about your intake, right? So like there's also that effect too. I think of just like, oh, since you're starting this thing, you're paying attention to it, you're starting to notice the benefits of it, right? So it's like, yeah, that checks out as well, I think.
Yeah, like, it all comes down to calories in, calories out, and
Right.
if you're cooking more at home, then you're probably gonna lose some weight
Yeah.
because you're again conscious. You're not putting a lot of excess sugar in things because we know like sugar itself isn't the problem, it's the excess. And that's the same thing with fat. Excess fat's gonna do the same thing. Excess
Sure. Yeah.
protein is also gonna do the same thing. And so and you can have a high protein vegan or even vegetarian diet. Like it's more difficult sometimes, like depending on what resources are around you, but you can do it. And a lot of people, there are
Yeah.
a lot of vegan bodybuilders out there that do a high protein vegan diet.
Yeah.
Um, it's
And
very, very possible.
yeah, and Ben, you've met me before.
Yep.
I'm a 6 foot 5 monster man. Okay. I can meet my macros if I want to. I'm not saying I do it every day,
Mhm.
but like, that was true when I wasn't vegan, right? Like it's just being more conscious about like what you're putting into your body in general, right? So, yeah, it's absolutely possible. This idea that it's not possible is very weird because again, as you mentioned, there's like vegan bodybuilders that are out there and who are even more focused on that than I am. So, you know, definitely a thing.
Yeah, so we have benefit number 1 of weight loss, which, not exclusive to carnivore, not even easier necessarily on carnivore. So
Mhm,
that
mhm.
point, pretty debunked, in
I'm
my
curious to
opinion.
hear your take on number 2 here. I really wanna know what you say about
Yes.
inflammation because this one I don't know much about.
Yes, yes, I have lots of thoughts.
Mm.
And this is where I'm going to get into some of the ACC and AHA guidelines. So there are some studies that suggest that there are like decreased inflammatory cytokines and also like an increase of regulatory cytokines with ketogenic diets. And so again, not exclusive to carnivore, but that's the case with low carb, um, high protein diets. But what people don't really understand is that number one, inflammation is often a buzzword, because like not everything is caused by inflammation. I think one of the articles I've had pulled up um, gives a really good point that uh, actually, you know what? I might even just share this. So this is from it's a an article published by a physician at Harvard. So it's a Harvard article, um, and I will just share this
Those folks at
together.
Harvard,
Yeah.
I don't know if I trust them.
Yeah, so this is just why all the buzz about inflammation. And interestingly enough, I think this is actually one of the articles that they cited. So this actually I think yeah, this is something that they cited in their carnivore thing and did not really say what they thought it did. So even here in this, there's a big line, like, because you see all the things that the buzzword is trying to encompass. Like they want to talk about chronic inflammation, causing weight gain, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disease, stress, etc. And then there's this fun statement down here that said, like, there's a myth that inflammation is the root cause of most modern illness, and they say no. A number of chronic diseases are accompanied by inflammation. So
Mm,
they're not
mhm.
caused by inflammation, but oftentimes you get inflammation that comes with the chronic diseases.
Yeah.
Um, and where do they go with this is to talk about atherosclerosis, which takes us into the AHA guidelines. So this is really important when thinking about cardiovascular health and heart attack risk and stroke risk because you have inflammation kind of within the blood vessel spaces, and it's the it's oxidation of the lipids that can cause it to rupture and then cause things to narrow and clots to form and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of studies over the years trying to figure out the impact of diet on heart disease and on stroke risk. And so that's where we've had like all the trends related to cholesterol, like should I eat eggs, should I not eat eggs for my cholesterol, all of that. Um, so of course, certain things that we know impact cardiac risks, such as smoking, alcohol use, etc., still true. We know that those things are not great, but on this isn't the one I wanted to share. Where did I put it? I think I didn't. Sorry, I have so many
He's ready.
articles that I've pulled up for this
He's ready,
stream
folks.
today. Yeah, yeah.
Overqualified for YouTube streaming. I'm telling you.
Yeah, here we go. So we have the AHA diet and lifestyle recommendations. And I've actually had the privilege of working with many cardiologists, but one in particular actually, like at my current hospital, actually previously like had degrees in nutrition, and then went on to become a cardiologist. And so she's given us lots of talks about the relationship of diet and heart disease. But the recommendations have changed to more of a Mediterranean diet or a plant-based diet. And the reason they recommend the Mediterranean diet, where you can see here, is that it emphasizes a wide variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and products mostly made up of whole grains, healthy sources of protein, and they say mostly plants, such as legumes, nuts, and then some fish and seafood, low fat or fat free dairy. And if you eat meat and poultry, ensure it is lean and unprocessed. So the recommendation from the AHA and the ACC are like for cardiovascular health, so including decreasing inflammation that
Yeah,
causes
but
heart
Ben,
disease
those are
risk.
liberal soy
Yeah.
organizations. That's big soy trying to
Yeah,
tell us how to live our
and that's the thing.
lives.
A lot of the carnivore diet people are very anti-medicine, and you can
Yeah,
see that in a lot of their rhetoric. Because we have the studies, we have professional expert organizations that have taken the turn from, because it used to be recommended to have meat. Like people used to think that you needed to eat meat
yeah,
in order to get these benefits. But we've taken a huge turn to say no, actually, like the countries that are the most successful in weight regulation and with disease risk have a primarily plant-based diet. And if they add animal products, it's in moderation and it's
yeah.
usually lower in fat.
Yeah, and I'll say this too, Ben, because uh, a lot of that is because animal agriculture is extremely profitable and has a way of influencing public opinion on a lot of these issues as well, right? Like it used to be a
Mhm.
time where the one of the bigger lobbyists in the country was cigarette companies, right? And how many of these companies were trying to figure out, okay, how can we get doctors to say XYZ is good for smoking, stuff like that, right? And like obviously, like there's been huge ramifications because of that. And
Mhm.
we've done a 180 as a society and realizing, okay, yeah, actually this isn't so great. You stop hearing like 4 out of 5 doctors recommend smoking Lucky Strikes, right? Like we don't do that shit anymore because okay, well now there's too much information out there that suggests otherwise, right? And I think the same thing is happening with like meat at the moment as well, because I think like you and I we went to you went to public school, right? You went to public school in the
Yeah,
U.S.
I went to one of those charter schools that was like
Okay.
basically homeschool, but as public as it could be.
Yeah, and you know that like we got milk cartons, right?
Oh yeah.
In every
Yeah.
single thing. They don't do that in other places in the world.
Mhm.
They do that here, right? Because like again, that's a specific the subsidizing that happens between like public funding for
Yep.
schools and animal agriculture. So like there's a lot of influence that happens too with what's supposed to be the recommended healthy diet with stuff, and like meat has been just a staple for Americans for so long. And I think like that's really starting to change, of course,
Mhm.
with new research, but also just because of a cultural shift happening as well. So
Yeah, definitely.
mm,
And something that they address in a different article, same recommendations from the ACC, the American
mm,
College of Cardiology. They have like basically the same recommendations, but their article went in a bit more detail where they had talked about some of the big differences within a Mediterranean diet are the fact that, of course, you're not using as many animal based fats, you're using more olive oil
hmm
um, when you're cooking and such. And the other thing too, of course, is that like instead of having processed desserts, oftentimes you're having fruit as your dessert. And of course, you're still getting sugar. Like fruit sugar is sugar. And people don't recognize that you're still eating sugar when you're eating fruit. But like for the most part, unless you're eating an absolutely insane amount of apples or whatever during the day, you're not gonna gain weight from the extra apple that you eat during the day. Like, and you can get a surprising amount of volume for the same amount of sugar and the same amount of calories
Yeah.
within like a couple cups of fruit as you would with like bread or other things. So, and some of those volume things are what's going to keep you like satiated. And that's
Yeah.
the thing too. Like, sure, protein can keep you full, but also fiber can keep you full too.
Yeah.
So,
100%. 100%.
so I'll take us back to the other
Snap
article.
back to
Yeah.
reality. Oh, there goes inflammation.
Yep. So there goes inflammation. Yeah, and so you can decrease your inflammation through plant-based ingredients. Crazy.
Yeah. What a concept.
This next one
Amazing.
is funny too. Kind of goes along a similar vein. I won't take too much time with this one because I think I've talked about it elsewhere as well.
Yeah.
But I do want to share the little asterisk there for the source because this is funny. Like, so
Tell
they
me about it.
say their claim is that healthy fats are responsible for optimal hormonal function, including testosterone, which, yeah, they're not wrong there. And diets that are high in healthy fats have been shown to improve testosterone levels. And emphasis
Right.
here on healthy fats,
Yeah.
which they
Not meat,
even
healthy
mention
fats.
there,
Yeah.
healthy fats. And you go
Yeah.
to the citation. I think I need to click on it again. The citation that they use.
Is it on a new tab? There you go.
Yeah, I had to move it over. The possible effect of dietary fat content and the ratio of polyunsaturated to saturated fatty acids on serum sex hormones.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's going to change your ability to produce hormones is the amount of lipid available, and you can get like an optimal range of your hormone production through unsaturated fats, which are primarily plant fats and not animal fats. Like, this does not prove their point at all. It just says
Nope.
you shouldn't have a low fat diet. And like, I agree, you need a certain amount of fat to make these hormones, and that's why starvation is not a great idea. But you can get that with plant-based fats,
Yeah.
and you're
This
not going
is
to have this problem.
I think this is another cultural issue because we have this idea that, oh, well, men have more testosterone than women, right? Cis men, cis women, right? And then they men eat more meat. And then it must be because they eat more meat that it helps with the testosterone, right? Where one, of course, as anybody will say, genetics plays a huge role in your
Mhm.
testosterone production, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
like as you mentioned, right? It's fats. It's fats that do it for the most part. It's not like the biggest correlate for testosterone production is your fat intake, from my understanding. You maybe have a better understanding, but that's my understanding, is that it is your fat intake that determines
Yeah,
it.
It's like you
Yeah.
need the building blocks in order to make the structure, and
Yeah.
you're offering them the building blocks. Like,
Right.
that's what this is. Like, none of us are disagreeing that you shouldn't have the building blocks available.
Yeah.
Like, that's just,
I
it
I
doesn't
mean,
prove the point they think it does.
the there's just so many. I mean, like you said, like you want to get some fatty foods. Yeah, I'll show you some plant-based stuff that's got all kinds of fatty stuff in it, right? But like I think people associate that with meat for some reason.
Mhm.
And it's just like, I don't know, it's so easy to get fat stuff. Like that's the I'm least worried about that when it comes to um a plant-based diet, right?
Yeah, it's like you don't need to eat a stick of butter in order to improve your testosterone.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And also exercise and muscle mass increases your testosterone. So,
Yeah.
going to the gym, which we mentioned, you can go to the gym while
Hmm.
vegan. It's being a vegan is not going to prevent you
No.
from lifting. And in fact, I'll get into why it's actually often better if you're lifting specifically. Um, Carbs are your friend. You don't want to be
Yeah.
low carb if you're
Now,
lifting.
I have seen things, and maybe you can comment on this. I
Yeah.
have seen it. I saw at least one study one time, Ben, that I don't have a
Mhm.
good answer for. I don't know. I don't know the reasoning why this could be. That did look at testosterone levels amongst people with different diet plans, and vegetarians tended to be lower on average in testosterone than other folks, and I don't know why a result like that might happen, because again, it's
Mhm.
just contrary to what I understand of how testosterone is created and regulated. But I
Yeah,
have
maybe
seen
I
some
need
other stuff on
to
that.
look into that because I'm curious.
Yeah. um but again, like testosterone production, I mean, like if you have a serious um like issue in your testosterone, right? Like that's like foods are going to help with that, but like there's other medical interventions that might be more helpful for you than just diet as well. If it's low enough, from my understanding. Because testosterone is one of those things where I don't know. I'm skeptical about how much we can actually control. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it does naturally taper off over age, right? So
Oh yeah,
yeah.
it definitely does. Um, and then mental clarity. Many carnivores have reported increased focus, energy, and mental clarity. This is likely due to restriction of carbohydrates, becoming fat adapted, and running on ketones for energy, which ketones are not fats.
Yeah.
Like that's a false thing. And this is where I'm going to get into a little bit of a physiological deep dive. So, Dan, I'll let you kind of have your points while I pull up my pictures.
Sure. Well, so when you don't take care of yourself for a while, and then you decide, hey, I want to take care of myself, and you start going to the gym, guess what? You're going to feel the best you've felt in a long time. Like this, again, it goes back to the earlier point of when you're choosing to focus on a diet, you're going to have benefits, like pretty much regardless of the diet, because you're going to be more focused on your intake. You're going to be more focused on your body. Like that happens with everybody. These are the same arguments where people who are incels, right, who are like, I'm doing no nut November and I'm going to like not masturbate for a month. Wow, I have such increased focus. What's up with that? And it's like, yeah, because like you are just more focused about shit in general. Like that's just how that works. You're more becoming more aware of your habits and stuff. And exercise is a great way to feel more focused, because you're doing your body a better service. And I'm not saying, by the way, that there's not benefits to taking a break from spanking it. I'm just saying, like, you're not going to become an amazing, enlightened superhuman after not doing it for 30 days or whatever. But anyway, that's a different topic.
Yeah, for sure. We could talk about that for hours, I think.
Yeah.
I have a couple pictures I'm going to use as visual aids for this, but so this is a big, intimidating diagram of human metabolic pathways. We're not gonna rely on this image because it's too small of a font and too much going on here. So we're gonna
There's a
look at a
lot of things
simplified
here.
one. But this is just a precursor showing like, hey, this stuff is a little bit complicated, more complicated than just eat animal fat and then all your shit's gonna get better. This is fairly nuanced, but we'll get into some easier to read pictures. And a lot of you have probably seen this in a biology class if you've taken it, because we have glycolysis and the citric acid cycle, which are very, very important. I don't really have the whole diagram here of oxidative phosphorylation, but I think you all might remember enough about the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell that we could, we don't need the picture of that. But
Yep.
you
I went
need,
to public school. I know.
yeah, I think everybody here knows that the
Yeah.
mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But this diagram is very important because we do rely on carbohydrates for our primary functioning. And especially if we're going to get into discussions about athleticism and your ability to function at the gym, there are two different types of muscle fibers. Well, at least there might be more, but two main ones, the slow twitch and the fast twitch fibers, which each have a different job in exercise. So your fast twitch fibers are going to be what you use initially, what you're doing for using for explosive exercise, like short term, all out kind of like sprinting, weightlifting, things where you need a lot of power for a very short time. And then you have slow twitch fibers, which take a bit longer to warm up. And that's going to be what kind of carries you through a marathon or like sustained cardio activity. And both of those are important. And if you do either of them, you should get some benefit. Like all of those exercises are good for you. But actually what people don't recognize a lot of the time is that the like short-term explosive activities are going to help kind of burn a lot more fat and help you lose a lot more weight, likely because it increases your muscle mass and you're going to burn more calories while you gain that muscle mass. But it does rely on carbohydrates. And I know plenty of people in the grappling sphere that have tried to switch to keto and things, and that just makes me cringe a little bit because I'm like, you need your short-term energy supply
Yeah.
to do explosive exercise. And so
Yeah.
you're going to rely on glycolysis and your glycogen storage. And so if you have your glucose that of course goes through the whole pathway of glycolysis, you convert it to pyruvate, acetyl-CoA, and you get some ATP right off of this glycolysis pathway very
Mm.
quickly.
I'm always saying
Um,
this.
yeah.
All the time, every day.
Yeah. And so when you need energy right now, you rely on the blood sugar that's like already like in your blood. And then when
Mm.
you run out of that, you bring in your glycogen and you're like, I need some backup energy right now. This is very quick. We can make some ATP and then go on with our day. When you start getting into like aerobic exercise, you're hitting this TCA cycle down here. You're producing like NAD and FAD, all those things, which go to the mitochondria, which will then utilize like oxygen for conversion, like of converting all the energy into ATP. So yes, you can get ATP from more anaerobic pathways that don't necessarily require glucose, but this is the easiest way to go about doing it. When you don't have access to sugar, there's a couple things that can happen. Number one, since this is preferable, your liver is going to try to make more. Like your default compensation is to make more glucose. And so the other things that you're going to break down, like your fat and your protein, are going to be broken down with the end goal of making more glucose. So why are we not just putting more glucose in? Why are we going through all this? Like, yeah, you're going to potentially lose some more weight because you're making your system less efficient. You're using more energy to produce the same amount of effort. And you're losing that weight again, too, because you're losing the glycogen that you've had stored for so long. And you're not building it back up.
Yeah. That
But
makes
kind
sense
of,
to me.
yeah.
This is all a very complex system. It's almost like it's designed, Ben, you know?
Oh, absolutely not. It's horrible system.
Yeah.
because
Uh,
if this was well designed, your compensatory mechanisms would not try to kill you, and that's what we're getting into with
sure,
this.
sure. Yeah, that makes
So here
sense.
we have ketogenesis, and so in the absence of being able to produce enough glucose back into the system for use, we have ketogenesis, which is the mechanism relied upon by keto diets and the carnivore diet. And yes, you can function with ketones. Like it is the absolute emergency system
Yeah.
to operate on. It's not
Mhm.
ideal and it should not be done for a long time because what you're doing is you are making your body starve. Like this is a starvation pathway. And see, has a starvation or untreated diabetes. It's what gets you here because diabetes and why I think like a keto diet actually works well for diabetes is because you don't have access to the glucose you need.
Yeah.
Oh, and hey, we got a subscription. Thank you, Jury Foreman, for this up. But yeah, you have so if you can't access the glucose, then you have to rely on something else. And then
Mhm.
for epilepsy, if you take away the stored glycogen, you're reducing the chances of like having muscle that has enough fuel to seize. And so it can help prevent rhabdo and some things like that. But the big problem, which I'm taking a long time to get to, you can break down fatty acids into like pyruvate, and you have a subset that will go off and become acetyl-CoA, but any pyruvate you make is not going to become acetyl-CoA, which kind of limits what it's able to do.
Mm.
But we have this ketogenesis process, you have some acetyl-CoA, and you end up with a few different products. One of them is acetoacetate, which is one of our ketone bodies. You have another one that is it like, I always forget the name of it. The ketone, it's like something beta glutarate.
We got gluconeogenesis, we got neongenesis evangelion.
It's beta. It's beta hydroxybutyric acid, and then the last one is acetone, which I think a lot of us have heard of. It is nail polish remover.
Yeah.
And I say that to scare everybody, but you're producing acetone in pretty decent quantities, and so if you're just like if you're relying on this method that's producing a lot of acetone, you go into ketoacidosis, just like you would in uncontrolled diabetes. And it's a huge risk with keto diets and with carnivore diets, and why the goal is to stay in ketosis and not ketoacidosis. But we don't really have a lot of studies on the long-term effects of staying in ketosis longer than 2 years. But you can see where there'd be some problems with people not knowing that this is what you could end up with, and not like, sure, you can do this responsibly, but does the average public know how to do this responsibly? And that's hard to say.
Yeah.
So there's my little rant about physiology.
I'm more informed. My understanding, I mean, like, again, it was just always like ketosis, like, yeah, like it's an emergency system. That was my basic understanding, and that it's just not sustainable, right? And
Yes,
so I mean,
that's the
yeah,
bottom line up front, is that
yeah,
it is a starvation pathway. You're going to try to make more glucose anyway, so you might as well just put glucose in from the beginning, and you could die.
yeah. Cool,
So
cool.
that's the
Yeah,
important stuff.
a lot of ways for us to die from the human body, I guess. Maybe not so well designed, as you pointed
Yeah.
out.
But, and that's also why, like, that, going back to the mental clarity thing, that's the big reason why you get the keto flu. What people will say, where you get brain fog, because they don't mention here the fact that a lot of people get brain fog on a keto diet
Mm,
because you're not feeding your brain properly.
yeah, that makes sense.
And of course, they're they're at one of the advocates they're relying on is Meat RX.
Meat
That doesn't
RX, which is
sound,
an awesome grifter name, I gotta say.
yeah. And their claim is that thousands of people have reduced or even reversed symptoms of diabetes, digestive issues, depression, which Jordan Peterson is one of the people that says it cured his depression.
Yeah.
Just generic mental disorders, skin condition, joint pain, hormonal imbalance. It
Lyme
reduced
disease.
Lyme disease. I don't know how that's possible. I think they're talking about chronic Lyme, which is not a thing, or at least the way that people think it is. You can have chronic Lyme disease if you were actually like infected with Lyme disease, but a lot of people think they have Lyme when they don't.
Okay.
Candida overgrowth is also not like the way
I don't
that
know
they're
what that
using
is.
it is not
What
a
is Candida
like
overgrowth?
it's a yeast infection, which you
Oh,
can, like, there are real people that have Candida overgrowth, but Candida is an opportunistic infection and will really only cause problems if you're immunocompromised.
okay. Interesting.
Um, but people have used that as a buzz phrase now to say, well, how do you know you don't have Candida overgrowth? And
What
it's
about
become
cannabis overgrowth? Can you suffer from that?
like the cannabis is growing in your
It's growing
body.
inside of you. You're producing it.
I've not heard of that being the case. Find me
All right.
a case study.
I'll look up
I
some
will learn
studies. I'll
something.
go to Google Scholar. I'll see what they say.
But yeah, what are your thoughts kind of on this list of
Well,
miracle
again,
cures?
it's one of those things where I could Google every diet in the world and find some people saying it helped me with X, help me with this, right? And it's like, I don't know, citation needed, I guess. Like, you know, when you're feeling like you're not in control of your life and you go on a diet and you're more in control of your life, yeah, I could see how that would help your depression, right?
Mhm.
Mental disorders is such a surprising thing to hear from a fucking doctor, because it's like, what the fuck do you mean mental disorders? Which ones? Like, that's such a vague thing to put there. And I get it, it's supposed to be, a cell line, but it's like, it's just, I don't know, irresponsible, I guess I would say. You can find a doctor advocating for any kind of diet in the world, right? Because nutrition is a very specific science, right? And like, there's people who, your general practice doctors aren't necessarily looking at the latest nutrition stuff every day, right? So I don't know, like, the fact that you find a doctor that can advocate for this stuff, that's the low bar for me. Right? It has to be, okay, what does the field as a whole say? Right? Like, not just the
Right.
one person. So I don't know.
Yeah, they're as vague as possible so that they don't get called out for practicing medicine or advising medical treatment without a license.
Yeah.
So they can get
Yeah.
away with it because they're like, "Well, I didn't claim it was gonna cure this stuff, and I
Yeah.
didn't even claim a specific disease, just said symptoms,"
Yeah.
and they can get away
Reduced
with it.
or reversed symptoms,
Yeah,
which is crazy. I don't know.
yeah,
I don't know. We're gonna reverse your mental disorder by eating meat. I don't know. I mean, obviously that's not explicitly what it's saying, but like, it wants to give you that effect.
yeah, it's wild. So let's look at the foods you can eat on the carnivore diet. So imagine going through life like this. You can only eat meat and animal products, which I think we all know what those things are. But
Yeah.
look, we got meat, and they're
Yep.
recommending like 80/20 ground beef, fish, eggs, bone marrow, dairy, lard, grease, and other animal based. Like it's
Yeah, I love
very few times
lard.
you
Your
see
diet's gonna
lard
have
and
lard
grease.
in it. That's a headliner, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Um, all you're getting rid of all fruits, all vegetables, most dairy products, all sugars, which like not true if you're eating dairy, but I mean they're saying that you're cutting out most dairy products, but I think most of the carnivore people that are like out there in the media are not really cutting their dairy,
Mm.
at least from
Yeah.
what I'm seeing.
Well, they showed pictures of the carnivore diet up there, and it had milk and yogurt and stuff. So,
Yeah.
sounds like it's a hot topic in the carnivore community.
Yeah, it's like because if you're having lactose, like you're eating sugar. Sorry.
Yeah, which that's, again, hilarious, because it's like, do you think Neanderthals were eating yogurt? Like, I thought this was about going back to basics here. Like, they weren't doing that. Like,
Right.
contrary to popular belief, we were not drinking the milk of cows for most of human existence. Like, it's just not a thing. We weren't doing that. At best, there are some ancient cultures that did have very specific dairy products, particularly cheeses and stuff, right? Very specific parts of the world, not worldwide. And also, it was not the same consistency that it was today, because the cows we have today are way different in what they eat and what even they produce, right? So it's just again, this false image, this false rhetoric of, oh, we're going back to basics here, but also you can drink your regular 2%, and I don't know, whatever the fuck Jamie Lee Curtis is selling on TV with the yogurts. I can't even remember. Activia. There we go.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It's it's wild. Yeah, and of course they say like avoid like processed meat or I'm guessing like heavily processed meat because all meat is processed. Like you can
Yeah.
if you're going out there and biting a cow, like sure, then your meat's not as processed. Like if you own a cow like from birth to death and you just bite a cow, sure, your meat's not maybe
Yeah.
not processed, but Like, you have to process meat in order for it to get to your table. So,
But again, like even then, that's deceptive because it's like again,
yeah.
all cows, all of them, whether it's the factory farms or farmer fred, are going to be eating fortified foods, right? Like they're going to be eating stuff that's already processed, which is going to inevitably affect the product that you eat at the end of the day, right? So this idea of trying to avoid it all is still deceptive, I think. In the way they talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that they've included a lot of the things here that have fiber in it, and you're definitely limiting your fiber. And they mention that kind of in the cons. So it's funny that they add the disadvantages after they give you the whole meal plan.
Yeah.
Um, but look at this like example week on this diet.
Yeah, we got poached eggs with bacon, tuna and hard-boiled egg sardines, and bone broth and roasted chicken for dinner. Jesus Christ.
It also sounds very like I guess you can use some seasoning, but like it sounds very salty
Yeah.
and underseasoned. Either really salty or really underseasoned.
Well, it has to be. I mean, your level of salt intake on this is just going to be higher, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how you can get around that.
Yeah, because who's
Um,
gonna be eating this stuff without putting salt on it?
yeah. Well, you get to have turkey burgers day 5, and you get bison burgers day 4. So that's cool. A lot of burgers here. Ground
Yeah,
beef patties day 1.
and of course they have their own product of the Chomps meat sticks. You gotta have the product from this website, of course. They're gonna get it in your head ahead of time.
Mm, really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, and there are plenty of things on this list that are like that have benefit, like in
Yeah,
moderation.
sure.
Like sardines are known to have some benefits, like in moderation, like for those omega threes. Liver is a good source of vitamin A. So you do have some health benefits. I know there's some people in the side chat right now, um, totally addressing a straw man argument because we're not approaching this from a do not ever eat meat standpoint. We're at least from a health standpoint,
Exactly.
we're
Yeah.
we're saying that there are reasons to not only eat meat and have a varied intake.
Yeah. I
So
mean, for most of human history, it's been a little bit of both, right? Well, human, when you say human, right? There's some qualifiers there. We're talking about like modern humans, Homo sapiens, right? It's always been a little bit of both, right? And it varies from culture to culture. So it's like, like obviously, like we talked about this earlier, when you're gonna want proteins, yeah, it's easier to do it on a meat diet. It's just easier. There's no getting around that. There's ways where it's become a lot easier on a plant-based diet, but it's just easier to eat chicken or to eat beef to if you're purely interested in just proteins, right? But diets and health is just more complicated than a single stat, right? We're not trying to, it's bigger than an RPG where you only got like 4 or 5 stats to worry about. There's a lot of factors to consider here. So it's also equally uneducated to say, well, this is just the S tier definitive diet, right? And this is going to solve all your things. Like I'm not interested in that. I know you're not interested in that. Um, we're just interested in the folks who do say those things who are like, no, this is the way that you should be doing it. And like carnivore is just not it. It's just not it
yeah,
from any point of view that I can look at.
like I'm willing to even like from a health standpoint meet at a place and say, hey, at least like if you want to eat your meat, just like have some broccoli with it, have some
Hmm.
beans with it, have
Yeah,
like add like you can still lose a lot of weight and you can still have a lot of the benefits that you're talking about by just,
yeah,
putting a vegetable on your plate, putting a fruit on your plate. Like, and you don't need a giant portion of meat. You can have a smaller portion of meat. You can have
yeah.
like a little bit of fish or like I don't get why people are like you have to go 100% into one thing.
No.
Like, it's
Well,
okay to have some other things.
the thing is we like our food, Everybody likes the food they eat. It's not like my my desire to want to make my buying choices vegan as much as I can doesn't mean that I like meat any less. I think it's tasty. It's great. I like it. I like eggs. I like the things they taste. I just have other convictions that lead me not to do it. So, like, cold turkey obviously doesn't work for most people. This has been shown time and time again. If you're truly interested in changing your habits, don't do it cold turkey. See if you can cut out some dairy products. How much dairy products can you cut out in a week, right? Just focusing on like one thing at a time is going to be way easier than just saying, "Oh, I have to do all these changes for health reasons." Because like I just most people just by and large they're not doing that. They just don't, and that's just how humans are. But making those smaller changes that has proven to be effective in changing habits and changing habits because food is a habit as well, right? It's comfort, it's ease of access, but it's
Yeah.
also a cultural thing. There's a lot of factors that go into it too, besides just the min-maxing of health stats, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's, something too that I wanted to bring up that is important for this, but important in general, surrounding any food discussion. Um, like when if for people who have had, like struggles with their relationship with food,
Mm.
um, any really restrictive diet is not gonna be a great option, and so especially it bothers me when these people say if you have mental disorders, like vague, unspecified mental disorders, and recommending, like, a very restrictive diet, like, that's a huge problem. If you have somebody who already has a poor relationship with food, and then
Yeah,
you tell them you have to restrict, like, that is going to make it worse. And
yeah.
that's something too where I'm in a camp where, um, like, ethically speaking, I do think, like, I am on the side of a vegan diet, for ethical reasons. Um, I think, like, no matter where you fall on certain scales, there's some people that are gonna be, like, enough of an exception for you to say, "Okay, you have a reason, like, to not go along with what I'm doing."
Inevitably.
And that's one of them. It's like if you have a poor relationship with food, like, the first thing is making sure that you are safe and that you are able to feed yourself in a healthy way. Um, and so there's a lot of nuance that comes with any of these conversations. And so I think anybody that wants to make the say this is the diet that everybody should follow is like, hold on, that's not a conversation that really anybody needs to have. Cause like we're all gonna have different reasons for doing different things. And I think we can work towards better things like in optimal situations. Um, but like, there are a lot of problems with it, like, insisting that anybody follow something very restrictive, especially for a longer period of time.
No, yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, like, first of all, I think it's important because you brought up, right? There's a difference between choosing to be plant-based and being vegan, right? Because vegan has ethical
Mhm.
considerations. And specifically, and I'm pulling it up here because I always forget the actual wording. The Vegan Society, which is the oldest vegan organization in the world. Technically, well, with a caveat because they invented the word vegan, so technically they're the most vegan, but they're not the oldest ethical organization towards that, right? They're just the first ones that came up with vegan. Here's the definition, right? Veganism is a philosophy and way of living which seeks to exclude, as far as is possible and practicable, all forms of exploitation of and cruelty to animals for food, clothing, or any other purpose. And there's a little bit more to that, but there's the part that a lot of people miss with that, which is as far as possible and practicable. Okay. If you have a health condition where a animal product on the market right now is going to be the most accessible for you to deal with that, I'm not gonna scream at you. I don't care. That's not what I'm about. I just don't think everybody needs to eat McDonald's every day. That's the thing, right? It's just like yeah, let's talk about here's a box. Maybe there is and I'm fully on board with this, that there's a box of use cases right now
Mhm.
where okay, animal products are a necessity. That's just not the case for most people at most
Yep.
times. Okay? It's just not. If we're being honest with ourselves, okay? It's just not. And like that's the case I make. And you know what? The more we've advanced, the more we've made that box smaller and smaller for what's necessary for human consumption, right? Particularly in food, but also in all forms of animal products, right? So, if you're worried about, oh, I just don't think I can commit to all this at once, it's just too much for me. I I encourage folks. Most people have a vegan understanding of ethics. If you take care of your dog or cat and you think that they're the most wonderful thing in the world, that's a very recent and modern phenomenon in terms of human relationships with animals. We haven't always had that. I just try to be more consistent with how I treat all animals that way. But point being, I guess, right? Like, if you have an unhealthy relationship with food, as been mentioned, going cold turkey is not the way. Figure out a healthy way to do that for yourself. And because if you figure out the healthy way to do that, then you can make those long-term commitments, right? Somebody saying tomorrow, oh, I'm gonna go vegan because like this is the right thing to do. You're probably gonna fail. And that's just what happens. I would rather somebody make smaller steps towards a healthier commitment than trying something all at once. Because I mean, we just know how that works. We have evidence for that, right? But anyway, there's my rant.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it's definitely there's a difference between like a reasonable, like nuanced position versus this is the one thing for everybody. Anything different than what I say is bad, which is kind of what we're seeing with the whole carnivore thing. Like
Yeah.
the carnivore community is very, very much about you will stay with the tribe at all costs.
Mhm.
Um, and we're gonna get into the risks. Um, and this is dangerous here. So like this paragraph of getting through the first month of an all meat diet, where they say get your blood tested. Like I'm not a fan of just everybody getting tests for everything. That's dumb. I'm gonna do a whole medical myths about like why you don't need to get tested for everything. Um, but they say this phrase, "Don't quit when you don't feel good," and
Oh, no. Oh,
that's
no.
scary.
That's not a good thing to put. Oh, no.
That's really that's going to prevent people from getting help when they need it. And someone could be in ketoacidosis and not get help because they might say, "Oh, well, I don't feel good. I was told not to get help when I don't feel good or not to stop." Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
problematic.
That's not very good. If you're making major changes to your diet, consult your doctor,
Yeah.
maybe, and not
Yeah, please.
websites. Like Chomps, you know?
Yeah, and there's definitely reasons to like talk to your doctor like when you might want to make these changes because depending on availability in your area and insurance and all that garbage, a lot of us are really happy to give you a referral to a dietitian if you want to make big changes. And like, yeah, I understand the hesitation with trusting a physician with like your dietary needs because we're not dietitians.
Yeah.
But I think most of us who are honest about it will say, absolutely, let's get you into a dietitian. And then you can tell them what kind of diets you're looking at doing, what your goals are. And then they should be able to work with you on how do we make this safe and healthy for you to do.
Yeah.
Like, and if you want to do a carnivore diet, like probably best to do it with the guidance of a dietitian and not just on your own. And I don't mean like some internet nutritionist that has unknown certifications from who knows where, but like somebody who is a licensed to practice dietitian with oversight that's following guidelines.
Yeah. 100%. I'm with you on that.
So risks of the carnivore diet, which they don't mention some of the nutrients that you're
Oh, I did
gonna
have
miss
another
most of the
thought actually,
time. Oh
from
yeah,
your
go for
last
it.
thing. Well, just like,
Yeah.
I was thinking about like smoking, right? So
Mhm.
like everybody knows these days smoking's bad for you. Even people who smoke will say, yeah, it's bad for you. But like it's just hard to quit, right? So it's like if you want to quit, yeah, quitting is like probably like for health wise, like objectively the right thing to do. I don't think there's any argument there, right? Like
Mhm.
there's no going to be benefit if you keep smoking. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe like there's something I'm not thinking about there, but like there's bad ways. You can't just quit for if you're smoking long enough. It's just that also is just cold turkey again, right? Doesn't help. Like it, you have to consult with people who can help you transition in the best way possible. And help you what that looks like. And it does take effort. You do have to try, but it's like, yeah, if you have a goal in mind, you can definitely do it, you know. But I don't know. I guess what was I going with that? Websites aren't going to be your best bet. Maybe that's where I was going with that.
Yeah,
Random
yeah.
diet websites. So
Yeah, definitely not. The internet is full
yeah,
of misinformation. And again, like I am fully aware that there's plenty of people in the medical community that are not good sources of information, unfortunately. And it's totally okay to get multiple opinions,
yeah,
and
yeah.
ask questions because you've every right to have a good practitioner that's overseeing what you're doing.
Hmm. For sure.
Um, so for some of these, we don't have to take too long on these because we've hit on a lot of points already. But
Yeah.
with a lot of the vitamins, if you do eat organ meats, you can get a lot of the vitamins, but most people are not planning. They're not planning out their micronutrients.
No.
Uh, and I don't think people understand how much work doing a diet like this takes, like, to do well. Like, in order to do this in a healthy way, it's gonna take you a lot of work to find the right dosages of supplementation that you need and planning out exactly what meats you need to eat when to get that. And don't get me wrong, like, there's a lot of ways that a vegan diet kind of requires similar effort, um, but, like, you have to put some legwork in order to avoid nutritional deficiencies if you're having
Yes.
a more restrictive diet.
Yes. Yes, and that's true for being vegan as well. But I think vegan stuff is easier to handle with supplements than it is for a carnivore diet. Because like they're talking about like vitamin C here. Like, yeah, what are you gonna get from doing an all meat diet? They're saying eggs and organ meat, but like that's news to me. If you get vitamin C from organ meat, I guess that's true if they're bringing it up, but I don't know. uh, yeah, scurvy I guess is gonna be up there in my list of concerns.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Vitamin A deficiency is another one, selenium deficiency, which a lot of those you can get from organ meat,
Yeah,
but you actually have to eat the organ meat then. Like, you have to be consistent about it if you're going to do that. My
yeah,
big concern was this lack of fiber, and this was
right.
the biggest thing I initially thought of was your bowels are going to hate you. Especially if you have something like diverticulosis, like you could worsen that with a lack of fiber.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the supplementation thing though, going back to I just thought about this. Because yeah, obviously the fiber. I don't know how you're gonna do this on the carnivore thing. We kind of talked about it already, but like the kinds of people who are in this space, right? Who want to sort of be anti-establishment and get away from, whatever their ideological convictions command them to, they're not gonna be the type to want to supplement either, right? Like I feel like they want
Mhm.
to avoid that kind of thing too, because I imagine they have the same kinds of reservations. But maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe like they would just do the kinds that they would already be getting, like fish oil or something. I don't know, something stupid.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of the supplements that you're going to need are going to come from plant-based sources. And I
Yeah,
guess my question is, can you, if you're on a carnivore diet, is it acceptable to use a plant-based supplement, or do you have to use animal-based
right,
supplements?
exactly. Yeah, that's a good point.
Because
Yeah.
otherwise, you have to rely on artificial ones, and this community as well is very anti-artificial things.
Yeah, which is
So,
again so funny because God, I keep bringing this up, but like the meat that we eat, right, is from food that is supplemented to those animals. Oftentimes, most of the time, synthetic supplements go into the animals' products, of food that then gets eaten by the animals. Like it's arguably just as synthetic in a way, because they are not naturally getting all of the things that they eat for their diet, right? But anyway.
and I love their statement about the loss of good bacteria, which, yeah, that's a concern that I would have. But they say that GI issues are resolved after kind of having some time on the carnivore diet, and they say this is maybe true due to elimination of typical inflammatory foods, which we talked about really aren't you're really not impacting your inflammation that much with this type of diet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's kind of
It's not great. Sodium's another thing too. That interesting that they point out because that is, I mean, that's also interesting because sodium is oftentimes brought up for vegan diets
mhm,
because when you eat particularly substitute food, this is another thing that comes up with vegan stuff because a lot of people think, oh, you go vegan, it's just salads and stuff all day. Like, no, there's like all kinds of stuff that it's processed and stuff, right? But like, no, there's all kinds of vegan junk food. That's the stuff that's going to be really high in sodium. Like a sodium intake is something I have to be mindful of, right? But like I imagine it's gonna be even worse if you're doing carnivore stuff, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong
mhm.
about that actually. I don't know, but that's definitely gotta be something you gotta look out for if you're gonna do
Yeah,
this.
especially if you're using any kind of preserved meats, like
Mm,
the sodium in that's going to be pretty high. And you have to be more careful about like food preservation and like risk of infection through poorly handled meat. There's plenty of like infection risk with poorly handled like produce as well. But there are different concerns with those things. Um, and yeah, so I don't think they really make a good point with this particular argument.
no, no.
Yeah.
Um, and this what critics of the carnivore diet says, this section needs to be longer.
Oh,
In fact,
definitely.
it needs to be
Definitely it
the
does.
longest.
They should include if only they included the AHA guidelines, which
Yeah,
like I'd mentioned earlier, but they're not going to because it contradicts them. Like,
yeah,
yeah, we're heading towards favoring a Mediterranean diet or a plant-based diet to
yeah,
reduce cardiovascular and stroke risk. And something
right.
else too that I did want to mention that I didn't earlier, when you're eating a lot more protein, you have to get rid of that nitrogen, which happens through urea and the kidneys. And so if you have poor kidney health, this might not be a good option for you because you're going to have your kidneys have to work a little bit harder to get rid of that. And so there's a lot of things to think about there. And with this too, sodium is going to impact your kidney's ability to function, and like risk of kidney stones does go up with carnivore based diets. So a lot of people going more plant based will have improvements or like less likelihood of having kidney stones. And so that can be a benefit for a lot of people. But all of
Mhm.
that being said, there's plenty of health conditions that are impacted by this. And it's not so cut and dry, I guess people think it is. That this has a multitude of influences,
Yeah.
and you need to be careful no matter what diet you're going to take if you have certain medical conditions.
Mhm. Yeah. 100%. But I can't believe, yeah, this section right here is what? Let me count it real quick. Actually, one, two. Oh no, each one of those is a sentence. It is a 4 sentence section.
Yeah.
Needs to be a bit bigger. That's crazy.
Oh, for sure. Um, and they have their frequently asked questions, and we kind of hit on a lot of these
Yeah.
like already. So I think kind of any, and they're gonna have their ads.
Well, it's
But any,
interesting.
yeah, any
They,
thoughts on that section?
they're asking about, oh, can it put you in ketosis? Because there's going to be some mixed target like demographics between the keto bros, right,
Oh
and the
yeah.
carnivore folks, right? That's got to be in there. And like some simple stuff like, can you build muscle on a carnivore diet? I don't know who's asking that. Like, yeah, of course. I don't think that's necessarily as contentious, but um it's really interesting. I like, will it work for athletes? I'd be very curious because I know of, obviously they made a whole documentary about vegan athletes. I wonder if there's any completely carnivore athletes that are performing at like an Olympic level, because I know there are for vegans. I'd be very curious to see that.
Yeah, it'd
They
be
must
interesting
exist,
for
but
sure. Yeah. Any kind of like last thoughts on this whole article before we watch a
Um,
video?
meat if you're getting it, if the guy that starts your diet plan is calls his company Meat RX, you should be uh on your toes a little bit. Red flags. Okay, red flags. It's sad, like the thing is, like, this is a very niche, from my understanding. I could be totally wrong, but to me, this still feels, even with the influence of like Jordan Peterson, still feels like very niche to me. I've never met
Mhm.
a whole carnivore person in my life. I've met several vegans, right? Um, and I've met people doing keto. Like that's pretty prevalent. But the all carnivore, I think even the average person is still pretty skeptical about it. So that makes me feel better. Obviously, it is more popular now than it used to be because of influencers in the space and stuff. But I at least have hope that, like, I don't think it's gonna get much bigger than it already is. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the big thing is keto. Like people are still gonna
Mm,
be fans of keto. Um, and like if you're going to be keto, please eat your damn vegetables. Like don't do it full dirty keto. But yeah, I think that this is gonna largely remain fringe, but there's I don't know, with Gen Z, kind of like how we're mentioning, for some reason jumping on like the bandwagon with Andrew Tate and with Jordan
yeah.
Peterson and stuff, strangely enough.
Trad
Um,
calves,
yeah,
all the
these people
works.
do have influence, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that they even have this much steam going for them. But
Yeah. I don't know. But you know what? Like, diet is the hardest thing for people to change. It's much
mhm,
easier to change other things about your aesthetic than what you're eating in your body. So even just the natural practical applications for doing that kind of switch will always be a barrier, for better or worse. Which is interesting. But hey, there we go. That's a page. That's a web page for sure, Ben.
yeah. Well, we're gonna end this with some laughs. We won't go
Okay.
through the whole video because they ramble. They ramble a lot. Um, and to avoid copyright stuff, we are going to be interrupting quite frequently. I don't think it'll be a problem for us to interrupt quite frequently because it's these two. Um, but Jordan Peterson says that carnivore cured his depression.
Yeah.
And we're
Jordan
starting partway
Peterson.
through where he starts talking about that because he has this whole preamble about like his daughter and stuff, which
Yeah.
we don't need
But
to get into.
I'll save my
But
comments after. Let's watch the video.
yeah. Let me know when you want me to pause and we can do that.
So what happened? Okay, so 2 years ago she said, Dad, you have to try this diet because you have a lot of the same symptoms as me. Now, I didn't have arthritis, but I had a lot of the other symptoms. And I thought, oh, Christ, okay, Michaela, I can try anything for a month. She said, try it for a month. I thought, okay, whatever. I can hang by my fingernails from the windowsill for a month. It's like, it's just not that big a deal. And so I went on a really low carb diet. Okay, so this is what happened. I had gastric reflux disorder and I was snoring quite a lot. I stopped snoring the first week. I thought, what the hell? That's supposed to be associated with weight loss because I had gained some weight. I weighed about 212 pounds. And
I'm curious how he knows that. My guess would be like if his wife told him that she didn't wake up in the middle of the night, but like snoring is mostly reported by somebody else who sleeps in the same room. And I'm skeptical of the fact that it would have completely stopped. And I doubt that
Yeah, in
the
a
diet
week.
is what caused that. And I doubt the diet is what caused that if it did.
Yeah. And snoring, I mean, like, that can be unreliable too. Like, just because you have, even people who have snoring problems don't snore every night. It's just
Yep.
a thing, right? So for somebody who is allegedly such a smart guru, and then, just is so knowledgeable about everything he talks about, you would think that that would be weird to say, like, oh, it's just a week and I got better. Like, he should know that's not enough time to definitively say one thing or another. But no, he's Jordan Peterson. He's the smartest man in the world. So, what do I know?
Yeah.
I'm about 6'1.5", so that was my maximum weight. I stopped snoring, which was a great relief to Tammy. So that just quit, and that's a big deal, right? Because if you snore, you have sleep apnea, and then you don't sleep right, and it's like not a good thing. Okay, next. I started
Not
waking
all
up in the
snoring
mornings.
is sleep
I'd
apnea.
never been able to
Yeah.
wake up in the mornings my whole life. I always had to stumble to the shower, and then maybe I could wake up. It took me an hour, and I felt terrible. And so all of a sudden I woke up, and it was like, oh, look at that. I'm awake in the morning, and I'm clear-headed, and things aren't gloomy and horrible. It's like, well, isn't that weird? Then I lost 7 pounds the first month. I thought, 7 pounds, that's a lot in a month. And I'd already gone for a whole year on a sugar-free diet, and I didn't lose any weight. And I'd been exercising.
Sugar-free, but did you cut out bread and
No,
gluten?
no, it was just no desserts, no sugar, no. And
Yeah, so what you did is you went in more of a caloric deficit, and you
Yeah.
also lost, like I said, you lost your transient water and glycogen weight.
First of all, I'm very skeptical. Diet of a year, but yet he still thinks he's at an unhealthy weight. He talks about this. So obviously you weren't doing that great on whatever diet you were doing. I'm skeptical of that. But again, just like I was talking about the incel guys, the men go in their own way and they don't jerk it for a month. You know what they're doing? Why they say they have focus? They're probably exercising more. Usually they start exercising at the same time. I imagine what's happening here is he just started going to the gym again. He's like, oh, I feel better and I'm losing a little bit of weight. Like that's like 90% of the time an explanation for these stories, I feel like, with the diet thing. It's like, it's less the fact that like eating, what you eat is super important to your caloric intake and outtake. Like, we talk about all this, but like also just like taking care of your body in other ways too. Like it sounds like he started taking care of his body just a little bit better, and he started seeing some benefits. And that, again, that happens with any diet you choose. That happens. It just does. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree that a lot of the things that he is saying could be explained by many other variables.
Yeah.
And so I'm not convinced that at this point that that's the reason for all this. And again, like, and 7 pounds of weight loss in a month, like, isn't completely unusual. For most people, that's not a super healthy amount of weight. Like, if you're small, that's not a super healthy amount of weight to lose.
Yeah.
But if he's like in the low 200s, like, sure, like a lot of bigger guys can fluctuate about 10 pounds, and that's normal. So it's, and again, like very rapid weight loss, things that happen very quickly are often transient. It oftentimes takes fat loss to take a bit more time. So
yeah.
And I thought that might do it. Didn't make any difference at all. 7 pounds. Well, then I lost 7 pounds the next month. Then I lost 7 pounds the next month. I lost 7 pounds every month for 7 months. It's like I had to throw away all my clothes. I went back to the same weight that I was when I was 26. And my psoriasis disappeared. And I had floaters in my right eye, and they cleared up. And then the last thing that went away for me, I was still having a bitch of a time with mood regulation, and that sucked because when I changed my diet, I didn't respond to antidepressants properly anymore. They weren't working. And so although I was getting better physically in a variety of ways, like radical ways, I was really having a bitch of a time regulating my mood, and I was having sporadic, really negative reactions to food when I ate something I shouldn't. So that took about 1.5 years to clear up, and I was still really anxious in the morning up to 3.
Wait, so he had food-related shame.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I mean, if you have food-related shame, and then now you've decided that you're okay eating like whatever you want, in this case being carnivore, and you feel like you're not having food-based shame, like that can be a big reason why your mood changed. It's like if you're not obsessing over food anymore.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, but no, I have a lot of questions about these things. Is the floaters are not going to be related to this diet?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So he's got floaters in his eyes that somehow meat cures. I would love for him to explain the science on that process. That's really curious. Yeah, he's saying he doesn't respond well to antidepressants, but like this dude was literally in like a benzo coma for like a month. Like that's like public knowledge. So like it's hard for me to trust Jordan Peterson's own narrative about his own story here. you know, and just as a baseline, I'm going to be skeptical about what he says he's putting into his body. Because, yeah, he's already on a no sugar diet for a year or whatever, like, or no desserts. Like, I don't know, man. It's just, maybe he's doing the thing that everybody does and just kind of fib about their own story a little bit to make themselves feel better. I just think it sounds like he started actively trying to give a shit more about his body in general. And again, I stand by that. I think that's when most people do any diet, that's going to be the biggest factor in at least the feelings that you feel, right? But anyway.
Yeah, and something else too, like if he was doing a like no dessert diet like previously and then started cutting out like more carbs, like you can not eat desserts and then still overeat with salty like fatty foods. Like if you're overeating, you're overeating. And I think that's maybe like one of the biggest reasons people don't lose weight is because they think that they're tracking everything, but they're not actually tracking. And so if you start tracking what you're eating or like what he's doing, I don't deny that if you're eating like more satisfying like foods and you're increasing the volume you're able to eat without increasing the calories, then yeah, you're going to lose more weight, but you don't need like meat to do that. If you ate tofu every day, like tofu is very filling and you can eat a lot of volume and have like fewer calories. So if you eat tofu instead of meat every day, you could have probably very similar results like to that weight loss.
Yeah, it's true. And again, like we're always talking in generalities here, right? If you have PCOS, you have other things, there's going to be things that don't work as well. But like you're right, it's generally caloric intake is like going to be one of the largest indicators that's helpful for most people in like most cases. It's not everything. It's not, but like it seems to be the biggest help for most people is tracking caloric intake, right? Like that's what it is for when it comes to weight at the end of the day, right? But anyway, what do I know? I'm just a dumb YouTube guy with a fucking Windows XP background, so don't trust me. But
we're not Jordan Peterson. We're not
Jordan Peterson. We're not, we're not experts on
3
everything
months ago,
ever.
like horribly, and then it would get better all day. People said, well, you're under a lot of stress. And I thought, yeah, I've been under a lot of stress for like 10 years. It's like, it's a lot, but it wasn't any more stressful than helping my daughter deal with her illness, that's for sure. That, no, this is something different. And she said to me, quit eating greens. And I thought, oh, really? Jesus, Michaela, I'm eating cucumbers, lettuce, broccoli,
the cucumbers aren't what's
and
making you
chicken
fat,
and beef. It's like, I have to cut out the goddamn greens? It's like, try it for a month. Okay. Within a week, I was 25% less anxious in the morning. Within 2 weeks, 75%. And I've been better every single day. I'm better now probably than I've ever been in my life. And I haven't been taking
you heard this. The cucumbers were obviously making him anxious.
That was it. It was
like,
the cucumbers.
It was the cucumbers. Yeah.
We all know about this. Cucumbers and lettuce, notorious
make you
for
anxious.
Weight gain. You know?
Yeah. Both things that are basically 0 calories.
Yeah. Again, I just think he's a fibber. I just think he's like, it is a natural human thing, but also he's a public figure and he loves coming up with narratives and stories. And I think he's pretending like he's eating all this great stuff. And I don't believe it. I don't believe it. You know, he's been traveling a lot, going to all these public speaking stuff. He's obviously a busy guy. He's probably not cooking all of his meals. I don't think he's turning on the crock pot, you know, and making his weekly meals. I think he's probably buying stuff out, and he's probably was doing that for a long time. And it's like, oh, now I have some issues. It's like, yeah, that's what happens. Again, not judging him, just saying, like, I just don't think he's being honest. But I don't monitor 24/7 Jordan Peterson's life. So, you know, I'm speculating, but that just seems more plausible to me than whatever the fuck this story is.
Yeah. Yeah, we might not watch a whole lot more because he's just going to keep rambling.
Antidepressants for a whole year. So I don't know what, and I weigh 162 pounds. Like and I've actually gained musculature. I've been doing some working out, but not a lot. And so I can sleep 6 hours a night, no problem. I wake up in the morning, I'm awake. If I take a 15-minute nap, that used to take me an hour to recover from, that's gone. Here's the coolest thing. I've had gum disease since I was 25. That's been serious enough to have, I've had to have minor surgical interventions, scraping and that sort of thing to keep it at bay. It's gone. I checked with my dentist before this last tour. No inflammation. And that's associated with heart disease, by the way, gum inflammation and gingivitis. It's a good risk factor for heart disease. It means the system.
But your hygiene is what really plays into that. Like, that's not as much of it. Eat meat or eat vegetables. Like, that's
you got to brush your
a
teeth,
hygiene
Jordan.
issue.
Brush your teeth. Also, like, I love this idea of, I've been gaining muscle. I've been working out a little bit. It's like, yeah, bro, you don't.
Yeah.
You can eat meat 7 days a week. You're not going to suddenly get muscle. Like, do you think that's how that works? Like, you got to work out. Like, that's not, you don't just like eat the magic foods and suddenly you become, a bodybuilder. Like, I don't know what he means when he says that. That's so weird.
Well, in the sleep thing too, like, sleep hygiene is something that we're studying a lot more closely, and it's largely like a lot of people's sleep issues relate to behaviors around like bedtime and their bedroom.
Yeah.
And like when you start prioritizing some of those things, you often sleep better. And so there's a lot of things he's not telling us in his story. Like he's a lot of people buy into this because they believe that he's giving you all of the details, but he's not. He's not telling you everything that he changed in his life. And so I don't know what variable contributed to that.
Yeah. But you know what? Like, this anecdote is going to be more influential than whatever the WHO is going to be putting out, whatever, like, a lot of organizations. Now, granted, on an institutional level, right, those other institutions are going to be more influential for what other institutions are doing and recommending. But we're talking about in the marketplace of ideas, Ben, okay? Joe Rogan is the most popular podcast in the world, okay? And him talking about this, thousands of people have changed how they're doing things because of this. Like, we'll never know the full numbers, but it has absolutely happened, right? Because of, this guy and Joe Rogan was doing a thing, so now I'm going to try it. So
yeah, and that's why this is so scary. Like the amount of impact that this one video had, is probably pretty incredible. And people are probably getting hurt from it.
Yeah, or at least not treating themselves well, or getting misinformation, right? If you're gonna make choices for your body, you're free to do that. But like, wouldn't you want it to be like based on good information? Wouldn't you want it to be based on what like studies and people getting data on spreadsheets are saying, and not just, well, I tried this thing and it worked for me, right? Because again, you can do that for literally any diet. So
yeah, I kind of want to see what this I don't know. Yeah, I think this is all just going to talk in circles about things that we've already mentioned.
And Joe Rogan should know this too, by the way. I mean, he did MMA. I mean, he knows how to build a body, at least on some level. But he's not gonna call out Peterson too hard on that kind of thing, I think. I don't know. You got to get the guests. Got to have those connections. Anyway.
So we can kind of debrief because there's a lot that was said in today's episode. But kind of, is there anything that you want to leave with the audience kind of about what we talked about, or anything going forward on this topic?
I am not as I'm not a doctor, I'm not a dietitian. I'm just a guy who, when I decided to make better changes for my life, I started to do a lot more research, and that took time. It meant reading books, and it meant reading what studies say, not just, we were talking about this earlier, like from beginning to end, and consulting on what people who are writing those studies or who are more knowledgeable in that field actually mean. Because me reading a study is not even good enough, right? Because like, I have to be qualified to even understand what something's saying, and I'm not saying I'm doing that for everything I'm looking at. What I am saying is, human nutrition is hard, it's difficult, and it requires the work of people who are doing this stuff for a living for us to be able to tell us what's best. I'm not going to be able to make the absolute best choices for my own life, just period. That's just no way. We don't have all the knowledge for that. We have to have some sources of information telling us what's going to be best. And even then, there's always going to be variables that we still have yet to account for, because it's a developing science, and it's one of the most trickiest sciences to study, because there's so many factors involved that it'll make your head spin. And people criticize this part of science. They say, well, nutrition science, and rightfully so, I would say, seems to be all over the place, and it has been. But that doesn't mean that there aren't still general principles, at least, that you can follow, and at least you can account for sources, right? We're talking about like the fatty acids and stuff, right? Or not fatty acids. Talking about gaining fats in general, right? Like we can definitely say, okay, well, we know we can get fats from these sources, right? And not be like, oh, well, it's better for fats if you're getting from meat. Like, no, you can absolutely do that with plants. Like, that's not it should be contentious here, right? So anyway, like this is obviously a very personal thing for a lot of people, because we all have our own relationships with food and what we eat and stuff, and so it's hard to talk about sometimes, but it has to be addressed. That, look, regardless of your take, there's going to be grifters. There's going to be people who are selling some kind of product that may not be best for you. It may be better for them. I'd rather point that out, vegan or not, where you stand on your own diet or not. I think it's worthy to point that stuff out, and I'm glad that we did that today, Ben. So that's my take.
Yeah, and it's something that I want people to understand, that like, even if something is supposed to have benefits, like, you need to make sure that those benefits actually relate to the thing they're talking about. And if they're saying you should switch to my diet because of these benefits, you should look into, are those benefits exclusive to that diet, or can you get those in other places? And that's what we saw. A lot of the positives that were reported about this diet are not exclusive to carnivore, and they're benefits you can get from a variety of different diets. So more of the negatives are things that are pretty distinct, but the benefits not so much. And again, if this is something that you want to try, that's up to you. You're in charge of your own body, but please do it responsibly. Please put some thought into it, and don't just do it because Jordan Peterson said to do it. It's not a good reason.
And don't do stuff just because me or Ben say to do it either. That's not good. We should be one in many things that you consider or consult. I would say me less so, because I'm not even remotely qualified. I'm just a guy. So, good stream, Ben. Good.
This is fun. We'll definitely we'll have to find another topic in the future too. Maybe we'll do some about like the extreme side of the vegan community, even see if we can pick on some people that we seem to have aligned more with this time, because like there are fringe people in any system, and I'm sure Dan would agree that there's some vegans out there that are saying not so great things.
Oh, sure. I'm not, I'm involved in the atheist, at least the online atheist sphere. I'm not really involved in vegan communities, honestly. I just kind of do my own thing with it. And one reason for that is because you do tend to see a lot of misinformation and a lot of woo stuff for vegans, right? Because again, veganism, I think we there's kind of a difference between being plant-based and being vegan. I would argue that those folks are more plant-based, because vegan is a very particular ethical stance that not everybody who's plant-based considers, right? So I will say, I think that it tends to happen in well, no, actually, I'm going to backtrack on that, because that's not true. There's definitely just plain old vegans that just have ridiculous ideas and takes. Just like there are a lot of atheists. I mean, I know atheists that believe in Bigfoot, Ben. Like, it just doesn't mean that you're automatically right or smart on everything just because you have like one position you agree with, right? So I'm definitely open to doing something like that, because but at the same time, that doesn't mean, in the same way that just because they're atheists that believe in Bigfoot, doesn't mean that being an atheist isn't the quote unquote correct position to take, right? I would argue the same thing for vegans. So anyway, regardless,
Yeah.
maybe next time.
Yeah, and we will pick on bad ideas no matter
Yeah.
what community they come from. And
Yeah.
so hopefully we'll get to do this again sometime soon.
I'm super
thanks
down.
for
And I won't
yeah.
get my car fixed next time at the same day. That's a promise. Okay.
But I do want to point out Purple's comment, that Purple knows an atheist who is Bigfoot. So
That's right. Neil the 604 atheist.
I was just thinking
That's
that, yes.
he was
We
in the
heard it
chat
here.
earlier, so hopefully he's still there.
Yeah. Neil is Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And then again, I know we kind of shilled your stuff at the beginning, but for people who weren't there at the beginning, can you remind everybody where we can
Yes.
find you?
The best way to find me is through the Truth Wanted YouTube channel, but also my live stream project with Prophet Azad. Zadanza happens live Fridays at 9 p.m. Central every Thursday night. And I'm also a host with the wonderful Dr. Ben occasionally on Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience too, every once in a while. So look for me there on all of those platforms.
Oh, no, and I was corrected. It's Aaron Ra and his Bigfoot story. Have you heard Aaron Ra's Bigfoot story?
No, I don't know that I have actually.
I need to, because I don't think I have either.
That he
Maybe,
thinks
but
he's
I-
seen Bigfoot? Is that the story?
No, I think they're saying that Aaron was Bigfoot once.
Oh, was Bigfoot
Was
once
Bigfoot.
in like
Yeah.
the artist formerly known as Bigfoot? Is that what we're talking about here?
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know the story.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
And with that, we will leave it on that. Thank you everybody for joining us for the relaunch of Medical Myths. I'm hoping to do this more often on Saturdays. So stay tuned for next week while I decide what topic we're going to talk about. But take care, everybody. We'll see you all in the next one.
Alrighty, bye.